Hello, folks. Daniel here, Driving and Dragons, coming in to do a pre-recorded driving the conversation this time around. Unfortunately, the regular job preempts, and I had a business meeting that came up on Thursday that I have to pre-record this one to get the information out. We are, of course, continuing to follow along with the seven keys to effective TTRPG design. I've been working on that series for a while. Of course, the intro's out, the whole playlist. I'll have it linked in here for us, so you can go check it out. Members obviously get those videos several days in advance, and I'm going to try and drop them every other Wednesday, and then follow up with the Driving the Conversation, where we try to have effective game designers on to talk about game design. And when I talk about success, and this is probably one of the more important things that comes out, and a lot of people tend to miss. The success has a lot of different definitions. Some people say I'm a game designer who sold enough copies that it wasn't just my family and friends. Some people say success is I actually completed putting a game together and put it on the market. Others say, well, you don't have enough money to like pay a staff or to at least live off of it yourself, so you're not a success. And while financial success is a component of the 7 habits, it is not what the core of this is about. The core of the 7 keys to effective TTRPG design is about those second level habits that people who have created robust, durable game systems, the keys that they use to make that successful, beyond just the normal personal discipline stuff of, you've got to actually write your game. You have to actually put work in. You need to do the math, because if you don't do those things, your game just doesn't work. But whether it's sold 10 copies or sold 10 million copies, if you've got a game that is durable, that is playable, that anyone can pick up, read, and go sit at the table and play without you there holding their hands, if it feels right. And I know that's kind of a nebulous term, and it's actually one that's going to be a big part of our discussion today, is things that feel right. That is a success. That is a successful game. To tie back to what my channel is generally all about anyway, and that car produces 750 horsepower, and it goes around the corners flat, and it doesn't break down all the time, and it looks good. That is a successful car design. That is a successful car build. Whether I'm able to sell copies of it or do it for other people or make that car turn a profit, or whether or not I can take that down to Barber's Raceway and win a whole class of SCCA events, is irrelevant to the success of designing that vehicle and building that car from the ground up. And it's the same thing when we talk about that with these games and game systems. Is this system durable? Does it work? Does it fall apart on its own merits? Does it stand on its own merits? And does it accomplish what we want it to accomplish in terms of people sitting around playing it, the kind of feeling they get, and that sort of thing? So this week's video was Know Your Niche. It follows very closely behind the first habit, which was, or the first key. Got to break myself of that habit of calling it habits, because I would prefer not to get a letter from Stephen Covey's lawyers. But the first key, of course, is to be well read. And everybody had a version of both of these keys. Really, of all the keys, of all 7 keys, every designer that I studied, watched interviews for, discussed with, interacted with, or outright asked said this in one your subject matter. But Alexander Macro said it probably the best as a single succinct sentence. He said to read broadly to be polymathic, but to read deeply to understand your subject matter. So the first key was to be well read, to read history, to read philosophy, to read religion, to read history, to read fantasy, to read sword and sorcery, all different genres, to have a very broad, read the classics, to have a broad understanding of different things that you can bring in to your game, and different ways that people look at things, different ways to solve problems. Meanwhile, the second key, which is to know your niche, is more about that part where he says to read deeply into your own genre. And it's not just, when I say niche, I don't just mean the genre either. It also has to do with your niche of the type of players you're going to have. It has to do with the market niche that you're aiming for, and sometimes it has to do with the social niche that you're aiming for. So whether or not your game that you're designing is going to work for the people that you are targeting to provide it to that's an aspect of game design. You have to design a game for it. If I'm going to design a game that is for, say, OSR players, and I base everything around have a lot of success, unless I do something that triggers the feelings and triggers the overall aesthetic of that niche. So we're going to go ahead and get cracking on that here in just a second. Going to introduce my guests. First off, speaking of niches, my people know their niche. My writers know their niche quite well. Corvid Codex, Volume 1. I have published it. I'm one of the writers, and there are 5 other writers for 7 stories. And coincidentally, several game designers are involved in the actual writing. So being heavily read and being a good writer in your genre is a way of knowing your niche. But you too can know all of our niches by popping over there to Lulu and grabbing yourself either a paperback copy or an ebook. Both of them are great. Both of them are fantastic. Pretty high quality print. Let me see. I got one right here for you. I've got the fantastic high gloss 6x9 paperback, 168 pages. Pretty fantastic. Make sure you check it out. So without further ado, designers, if I can get get that to go away. Thank you very much. We are going to bring on Vicky and Dean from Everae Games, who are the ones who put together Untold Destiny. How are you guys doing?
Really well, thank you. And thank you for the invitation.
Indeed. Thanks very much, Daniel.
It's good to see you again. Like I said, first time I've got to sit down with Vicky. I've been on stream a couple of times with Dean before. I believe we came across each other on GMI once.
We did. It was a really good panel. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I think that was a pretty good panel. GMI does some great on those topics. So tell us a little bit about Untold Destiny, and we're going to get cracking on some topic discussion here.
Okay, do you want me to go, or would you like to, Dean?
You take the lead there, my lovely.
Oh, look at that. Okay, so Untold Destiny is classic roleplay reimagined. And it was funny when you were talking just then, classic roleplay reimagined. Who have we designed this for? We have designed this game for people who love classic roleplay or have been playing modern games and are looking for a bit more. We are focused on campaign play, though you can still use it for your one-shots. It is a fantasy system. It's a multi-D20 system, and it's got lots of immersion and reactions, and it really does. It sets your imagination on fire.
Mm-hmm. Dean, anything to add on that? Or did she pretty much hit the nail on the head?
I think that's a pretty good description. Just to stress, the classic heritage comes through in our design, the way the rules look, the way the game plays. So if you're used to some, like first edition, second edition, the basic box set, it will feel familiar but very different at the same time, because we have reimagined all the mechanics. Because I was fed up of house ruling systems. So I said, let's create a system that would suit how I want to run a game, how my players enjoy the game, making it more dynamic, more interactive during combats, and removing a lot of the fatigue I suffered from running games from the other side of the screen. So this is our child, if you want. We got the first level taster rules about to go out. They will be free, complimentary, and that will be on Tuesday coming.
Well, I didn't realize they were popping on Tuesday. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
We'll make sure I've got some links here for you. I'll make sure we've got those links in the description below for Untold on YouTube and X and all the other fun stuff. So let's talk a little bit here about the keys. So you guys have a game that has been successfully put together here. You have a game that has been developed and play tested and worked on. Which ones do you think stood out most to you, and which ones were important to your design process?
So are you asking? So I can see Dean sort of looking around. He's either been attacked by cats or something.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
But if you're talking about the 7 keys that you're looking at, well read, yes, absolutely. I believe play testing, and I'm gonna
play testing was the huge one. Yeah,
we have spent how long play testing? Years.
It's been over 3 years of constant play testing, and during that time, it was another one of the keys to success, which is the feel of the game. Something might work on paper, but in practice, it's awkward. It doesn't quite do what you expected it to do. And we were really lucky. We did a web series called Business Unusual, and it meant I had to edit it because it was a 4 to 5 hour session. I would edit it down into episodes to upload weekly. And it gave me the opportunity to watch the system being played out. And I could see the reactions of the players. I noticed things that I wouldn't normally notice when I'm running the game. And it fed so much into understanding how my target audience were dealing with the rules and the complexity. And if there were any mechanics that really weren't adding value to the game or confusing people. And it was a great opportunity just to keep refining until we ended up with the game that we have now, which it's not something you chuck together in 6 months. It takes years to build something, even when you have a fairly solid start, which is the classic D20. We're not breaking the mold with how the D20 works. You roll a D20, add numbers to it, get a number or higher. But it's the way we do it, the multi D20 representing your skill and stuff like that. The playtesting was just helping us really refine that and to make the players, when they're playing, feel far more immersive rather than fighting the mechanics of the game. So I don't know, it's a difficult one, because playtesting was key, but so was the feel of the game. And well read. Without being well read, we wouldn't have had that burst of imagination.
We wouldn't have actually gone down this route.
I know.
I actually think the feel. I know the playtesting was really critical, but if it hadn't felt right, we would never have got it to this point. And it links in with playtesting. And Daniel, one of the things I'd say is some of these things don't just stand on their own; they overlap. So if I look at playtesting, it overlaps with the feel. If you're not playtesting, you can't find the feel. And we had a mechanic right at the very beginning. And this is why I love our Business Unusual, because you will see it from what we originally thought was finished in 2024. And we completely changed it, didn't we, Dean?
Yes, it went through. It's quite strange. The core way the system works, the core principles that we had right from the start have remained unchanged. How they are implemented and dealt with in the game, that's been refined and that has changed. And it's
At one point we had a reroll mechanic that we loved as players at the time. We absolutely loved it. When we first started playing with it, we thought it was fab. We continued, we were using it all the time. And then over time, and this is the thing, when I say playtesting, it's not one and done. You've got to level your characters. You've got to do it over time. You've got to sit there and play it as you would do around the table. And what we noticed is this reroll mechanic we were all starting to just clump up with our numbers. They weren't changing. And then it started to get a bit boring because our numbers weren't changing. So we did, didn't we, Dean? We looked at that and we went,
Yeah, just to because you mentioned the reroll. This was rerolling of damage. So instead of your
yes,
attribute adding and increasing your damage, I said your attribute would give you a reroll of your damage dice. So on average you get higher if you got a good attribute. But everybody's damage started to the
clump.
kind of range of damage shortened, it lessened, and it was always in the same sort of areas. And if you had a lot of dice, like some of our roguish classes, your damage could be incredibly high because you're not rolling low numbers. So you're rolling lots of dice, and the minimum they can roll is 4. So if they're d8s, it's between 4 and 8. The other thing was people were spending ages re-rolling dice, and it was hang on, I got to re-roll. Oh, I got to re-roll. I got to, and it was clunky. It was time consuming, and it wasn't fulfilling the purpose we wanted. On paper, it should have worked. In practice, it didn't feel right, and it just didn't work.
Oh, absolutely. I think combat is what I always go to when I talk about the concept that developed into that key, which is, I believe it's 5. Key 5. The feel is more important than the real. I always go to combat because I tell people, I'm like, I was a professional fighter when I was younger. The number of variables that you would need to roll to determine if I throw a punch and hit you on the chin, numbers probably in the hundreds. Weight and positioning, my speed versus your reaction time, including your ability to physically react, your positioning, where, like I said, weight transfers, weight balance, our height, our reach. There's so many different variables that would either be a fixed variable or something that we would be rolling for. It's like, I'm going to roll a dozen dice just to determine if I land, and then probably another dozen dice to determine the damage if I really want to be realistic. But combat doesn't feel that way. Combat feels raw and gritty. Combat is fighting a 5-minute round and wondering why it's going 20 and 30 minutes when you're in it, and then sitting on a stool for a 1-minute break and wondering why it's over in 10 seconds. It's not it's gritty, and it is very, very vague, and the lines are always blurred, and you have things that hurt and you don't realize, it's like, well, why does that hurt? And if you go back and watch the video, it's like, oh, because I tweaked my knee when I did that, but I didn't feel it in the moment. I didn't see it in the moment. I didn't feel it till the next day. Feeling, you need a massive abstraction of, I roll as few dice as possible when I'm in combat. I can roll a whole bunch of stuff during an investigation to get little pieces. And it makes it feel more meticulous, and it makes me think about it more. But if I have to roll 15 different things in combat, it's like, man, my 2 seconds, my half second of throwing a punch just took me 20 minutes of game time.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem you see with a lot of modern D&D. Levels, you've got 1,400 minutes per turn. That wizard, the fighter is doing 9 action surges and 14 attacks and all kinds of other nonsense. It's like that fighter, I may as well get up and go wash my car because I got 20 minutes while the fighter takes his turn. And that kills that feel. And I do like how you talk about the playtesting. I thought carefully about the wording of key number 7, which is playtesting is infinite. It never ends. And I do think you guys you stumbled on an actual benefit of like live play and stream play, because I famously detest
honest. I would absolutely, if you're creating a game, I would absolutely 100% say video those play tests.
It doesn't have to go online. Just record your play test sessions. Record them. Watch what the players are doing whilst you're running the game, how they're reacting to stuff. Are they looking confused? Are they feeling in the moment? And you'll quickly pick up what's working, what isn't working. And no matter how good it is on paper, if your players aren't feeling it, they're not going to like it.
Well, yeah.
And also for the GM, because it reminds you of what was feeling a bit clunky at the time. Because one of the design principles we had was to relieve some of the GM fatigue. So it also allowed Dean to go, at that point, I was feeling really frustrated because this and that was happening. So what do I need to do? Because I don't want other GMs getting irritated by this particular mechanic. And that would force a rewrite. That would force a, right, this bit's not working. We need to fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting
And
rid
that's
of
one of the things
DCs.
Eclectic Goat said when she was on,
Yeah.
because Eclectic Goat handled the Be Well Read stream, and she and I were talking about it, and we were talking about playtesting. And I think this is another one where, like, having some people who took it to basically live stream it themselves and that kind of thing is one of the points she brought up about playtesting, is that it is extremely important that you have the game playtested without you involved. That you have rank, not necessarily rank amateurs, but I like rank amateurs, but that you have people who play different styles of game. If you're going to do Gumshoe, you have D&D players play it. If you're going to do a D&D adventure, you have Call of Cthulhu players play it. And you have people who you don't want to be there at the table, because if you're running it, well, you know how it's supposed to run, so you can't see your blind spots. If somebody else is running it, they're constantly looking over at you for the correction. If they just play it on their own and they come back to you and they're like, oh, well, I couldn't really figure out how this worked, you need to rewrite that mechanic because it doesn't work the way it's supposed to. So
well, it's funny that you say that, because we've done an awful lot of play testing, but one of the reasons for putting out the first level taster, and it's really robust now, we're going to also put a feedback form. What works for you? What doesn't work for you? We need that sort of community feedback now. Everybody who's played it has loved it. Everyone who's given it a go has really enjoyed it. But we spent a long time writing these rules, haven't we, Dean?
We have.
Typing our fingers to the bone. But we need the feedback of whether what was in our heads is translated into paper correctly.
Yeah.
And the only people who can tell us that are you guys.
Yeah. We've had people use the rules at the moment. They've created characters without us being there. And we've had from youngsters right the way up. And all of that has gone incredibly well. When it comes to actually running the game, we've got some people lined up to take the first level rules and start to run the game themselves and feed back to us what's working, what's not working. So far, though, it's been pretty positive. But you're right. It's the next level of play testing now, which is, okay, this is in the wild. What do you guys think? Is this hitting your buttons as much as it's hitting ours? And is there anything you feel is missing?
Yep. And remember, first edition is just alpha playtesting for second edition. I mean, it's really what it is. Like you're the first edition of your game is alpha playtesting for the second edition of your game. At least if you're doing it right, because you need to be paying attention to when it really is in the wild.
Yes.
When it really is with because like one of the things that I bring up on a regular basis for the the game I'm working on is that I have a friend who has kids, but I send them the book and I say, read this and tell me if you A, would buy it for your kids, B, if you understand it enough to help your kids play it, and C, if you think you could run it for them, because you have no interest in this, you have no background, you don't know. But if you can do it, I know for sure that if I send Vicky and Dean a copy, they're going to be able to run it like a champ.
I must admit, having
you
youngsters
grew up playing D&D. Yeah. So
yeah, we had having some youngsters at the table really helped, doesn't it, Dean? Because
they
have because they haven't been exposed to so many games. You get to see very quickly how quickly they sort of adapt to your rule set, which is always good fun.
Yeah. And the only exposure they've had to role-playing games is Dungeons and Dragons, because it would typically be through a school club or something like that. And we had one of our regular players, his son, started to play, had the rules. So we weren't involved, picked them up really fast. And when creating characters, I asked what was he most excited about in the character creation, and he turned around and said, buying equipment, because he had a ton of money and he could buy equipment. And in 5th edition, you typically just get given a bunch of equipment and that's it. And he was over the moon. He could kit out his character. And in doing so, his character became more real to him. So when he was out in the field, when he was playing, it was quite funny. He's very shy. So around the table, I'm there thinking, is he having a great time? Is he really? Because he's like very timid. And then at the end, I ask, did you have a good time? Big beaming smile. Oh, yeah, it was amazing. And then we get a text message from his father. He wouldn't stop talking about it.
That's excellent feedback there too. And to be honest, I think that if you can catch the younger players, they're really kind of the best players to catch.
Yeah.
They don't have baked in biases. They don't have their team picked out, so to speak. And let's be honest, if I catch a 14-year-old and I turn them into a player for my game, they're probably going to be playing my game into their 20s.
Yeah.
If I catch a 40 or a 50-year-old, I'll be lucky if he plays it 1 or 2 campaigns. A lot of times he'll buy it to put it on his shelf, and he might read it a couple of times, but never actually run it. And that's not a long-term player. That's a guy who life can come up and all of a sudden he doesn't have time for games anymore. Yeah. That's a guy who just goes back and plays that game he knows and never buys anything new. And I've already got this game. He may be playing your game, but he's playing your game first edition, and he's not interested in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th. Whereas that young player, he's going to buy first, and he's going to be excited when 2nd comes out, and he's going to be excited when the supplements come out, and he's going to have disposable income in the fact that he doesn't actually have any responsibilities yet.
Yeah. So he spends his dad's money. Yeah.
Yep. Spends his dad's money. And as the Catholic churches want to say, give me a child until they're 5 and they're Catholic forever. Yeah. Or as they said in the Green Mile, the juvenile detention facility was catch 'em young.
Yeah.
So knowing your niche, like all of these feed into each other. You have to, each one works better with each new system. So to get the feel, when we say the feel is more important than feel is more important than the real, it really is. But to get that, you kind of have to know where you're operating. And that's where I believe knowing your niche is what knowing your niche comes in. So it's in the video for knowing your niche, I broke it out into 3 kind of different philosophies. There's knowing your niche from a market perspective, knowing your niche from a social perspective, and knowing your niche from a genre perspective. And the first 2 are a little bit more nebulous. They kind of cross different ways because there's a niche of style of play, a niche of like a mechanical niche, if you will. And there's really a niche for a certain feel. So, for instance, Shadow Dark I used as an example. Shadow Dark, I'll ask you guys just a real quick short answer version, yes or no. Is Shadow Dark an OSR game?
Old school revival. It's got a little bit of the old school, but I wouldn't say it is.
No.
Personally. It has too many things that it alters from an old school perspective.
But does it feel like
that's not to say it's not a great game. It's a good game in its own right, but I wouldn't, as an old schooler myself, I wouldn't look at it as an old school game.
But does it feel like one?
Yeah, it's to do with the way magic works and stuff like that. I think, it's definitely got the influences of old school in it, but I think it breaks a few of these kind of rules of what potentially an old school is, or gives you that feel of being old school. And it becomes its own game in its own rights, which is great. And I think if you come from an old school background, you can pick it up fairly quickly. There's enough familiarity there, but I wouldn't have put it in the old school category.
That's good, because neither do I. Right. And that's exactly why it's exactly why. That's exactly why it is such a good example for the know your niche. Kelsey knew her niche, and from a market and from a player perspective, her niche to sell that game is modern players. It is modern players. And she has to give them, she understands that modern players are not going to deviate heavily from mechanics. The new school base is very hesitant to adapt new mechanics. They want to stay within their comfort zone there. They have certain things that they want to experience. The old school can handle that a lot, but you have to give them enough. I need that ticking time clock. I need that, encumbrance and light mechanics. I need that that deadliness and that feel of deadliness. I need that dungeon. I need that dungeon exploration, mega dungeon type feel. That go in, get out, adventure, tomb raiding, dungeon delving. But if I can put that feeling on a modern chassis, I can collect both sides because I understand what I need to get both sides to actually buy into my game. And that's where she had significant success, at least in my opinion, the way I see it. And then you look at the other person I put in there is RPG Pundit, who funds his life on selling games, and he sells exclusively OSR games. And if you look at it, he is never, ever, ever catering to modern players. He is never trying to get modern players to buy his games. He is exclusively coming out and saying, this is old school. It's very old school. I am doubling, tripling, and quadrupling down on everything important to OSR style gamers. He is staying very firmly within that niche of, I want to play this basic AD&D style game with new stuff. And both of those I see are facets of knowing their niche, at least from a mechanical standpoint.
I think that makes absolute sense.
So when you guys were targeting, what were you guys targeting?
Well, the challenge we had,
The mechanical side of things.
We actually designed for what we wanted. So when we first started working on Untold Destiny, it was about the game we wanted to run and the game we wanted to play. So we'd actually gone through from second. Dean had done basic. I was second ed. We went through third. We did fourth. Don't like that one. Went to fifth. I had several moans about fifth. We heavily house ruled everything from second ed up. We heavily, and I mean, sometimes our house rule books on the table were bigger than the actual manuals that we were using to play. So we've always
a little bit of an exaggeration, but not too far.
Giant.
The house
giant,
ruling was done to try and remove some of the mechanics that got in the way of just playing the game. So yeah,
lofty tomes.
In the case of 5th edition, actually adding a bit of depth to the game.
Yeah,
because 5th kind of took it the whole other way, and I added back in things like skeletons and half damage to certain weapons and stuff like that. So you actually needed an array of weapons and a bit more tactics when it came to battle. But as Vicky was saying, when we designed Untold Destiny, our niche we were thinking about was it was us, but we are in our niche. Yeah. We are the old school gamer / modern gamer who loves campaign-based play, who wants to get around the table with a bunch of friends, who has a campaign that might last a year, 2 years, 3 years, or longer. Loves the flavors of adventure, starting from the young adventurer, making a name for yourself, establishing a domain as you get older, then moving on to really great deeds until eventually at 20th level you seek retirement, having fulfilled your goals and having built a lasting legacy. And when we looked at we spent years looking at different dice systems, looking at different ways of doing mechanics and stuff like that, and it always came back to the D20. Always did. It felt more natural. It just felt like
we loved it.
Yeah. But you'd be surprised how many people you'll say it's a D20. You roll a D20 and they'll be like, not interested, and they just walk off. So when it comes to a niche, it's going to be those players who love the D20. So people from Pathfinder, people from D&D, people from old school. So your OSRs, your OSEs, and stuff like that. Anybody who loves that kind of classic role-playing, classic feel of fantasy, harking back to, what is it, Temple of Elemental Evil, which I played back in, I believe it was a 1E module when it first came out. And I remember Homelet and the moat and how difficult it was, the zombies in the cellar. And it was great. That module has persisted through the different versions, and that's the kind of feel, that's the niche we're going for. The people who love that kind of adventuring, want to be in a party, want to go out on an adventure, even if it's just going into a dungeon to try and loot whatever you can, or weave a story, a quest, achieve great deeds. That's the niche we were aiming for, because it's our niche. It's what we love when it comes to
Campaign
role
play.
play. Yeah.
It's always down to campaign play. And one of the biggest challenges we found with multiple systems is that low levels were quite exciting, mid levels started to get a bit wonky, and then high levels were a drag and had to be almost rewritten to make them playable.
Yeah.
We wanted to be able to give GMs something that they could take from low level, where you start at first, not start at third because you're worried about killing the characters, where you can start at first, where you can actually develop those characters so that they feel as if they have got depth and meaning in the world that you're playing in. And you can take them through the mid levels, you can take them into high levels, and you will still have challenges and it will still be fun around the table. And that's what we aim to do. And I can honestly say, that's what we've succeeded in delivering. I'm so pleased with how it plays at all levels.
Yeah. And
So
we've avoided. Sorry,
I was going to say,
yeah.
Sorry, I'm speaking over you there.
It's okay. It's okay. During playtesting, we tested all the way up to high levels. And the one thing I noted is we made sure the combat system was robust enough that it didn't start slowing down at high levels. And indeed, it might take a little bit longer, but you're talking a few minutes longer rather than hours longer. And it was just as fast, just as gripping, just as immersive as it is at first level. Yeah.
Okay. So I was just going to say that, that would be one of those aspects of, say, knowing your niche is looking in and saying, we want to do campaign play. Our niche is people who want long enduring campaigns running the same characters for, extended periods, for an extended narrative of that character. And we understand that the biggest drawback to narrative play, or not to narrative play, but to campaign, enduring campaign play, is that these characters get extremely boring mechanically once you get like later in their life. And it's like, you've got this character you spent sometimes years building, years developing, and you really like this character. You really are invested in this character from a hobby and a gaming perspective. However, you don't want to play them because of the fact that that you're going to get 6 minutes of in-game time taken care of, because it takes you 4 hours to get through that 6 minutes with all the stuff you got to go through. And it feels like homework. You got to crack open 9 books and memorize 14 different things and understand how these two abilities work together and all that other stuff at these high levels. So by understanding that this is a problem that is almost exclusive to those long enduring campaigns, you go in and you made changes to them to correct that particular error. Now, would you say that might not be appropriate for, say, another play style? Like, is there a play style you can think of where that would not be advantageous? Some of the changes you made?
So I'm going to answer this from a player's perspective, while Dean cogitates about a GM's. From a player's perspective, I've done one-shots. I have been in the campaigns. And one of the things I love about it is we can do a one-shot at a low level and we can have immense fun. You can do a one-shot at a high level and have immense fun. So, and it's the actual learning curve from playing that character at a high level compared to a low level. The learning curve isn't prohibitive. It's a nice curve. It's one that it's not suddenly becomes math heavy. The way that Dean's created a lot of the mechanics, it hides the maths behind the dice. And it was quite funny. One of the design decisions that we've made is players like to roll dice.
Yes.
And at one point, Dean was saying, well, I can tighten up the maths and we can reduce the dice. Every single playtester basically told him that they would chop his hands off before he reduced the dice. It was like, no, we like our dice. And the great thing is, because we're not adding masses of numbers together, I'm not the best at maths. I am, you'll see me in the fingers. And it's easy to actually pick up those dice, throw them, add them up, and away you go. You've got no additional modifiers that you have to keep adding to damage dice and stuff like that. You've got your multi d20s, you add a modifier, that's your test. And then you've got your damage dice. You can't make that more complicated than that.
Nope.
And it works.
It does. Yeah. I'm just trying to think. So, can it?
Tell we're melting, can't we? We're melting.
You can. We're like,
yeah, adapting. Yeah, I think
Adapting.
it can adapt to pretty much anything.
I think so, because it's built on the principle of the feeling of some of the systems of old. So taking the red box set and opening that up, that could be applied to so many different styles of adventure, creating lots of different tables at the time. That then grew even more under first and second edition. Second edition, you had so many different styles of play, often tied to different worlds. But the framework was always there. So we've taken the approach of making sure we've got a solid framework. It's built on a very modular basis. It's easy to adapt. If you want to house rule it, it's very easy to do that as well. But as it stands out the box, it's got everything you need. It's got weapons that have different purposes and different abilities that are very easy to understand, but can radically alter what you can do on the battlefield. One example I give is you can be a dual wielding warrior. You got a small hand axe in one hand, you got a great axe, or it's sorry, a massive mace in the other hand, and you're smashing into an opponent. The opponent brings up their shield. You're immediately interrupting your opponent, going, I'm attacking you, and I'm going to use my axe to hook your shield and pull it out the way. So I'm penalizing your parry test. So this person's now going to penalize parry test. You land the blow and you go, because I'm using a mace, I'm going to spend some more stamina, and I'm breaching your armor because this is designed to penetrate armor. You're in heavy armor, have a bane to your armor test. You're going to take the full damage. But it's all very quick, fast. So when it comes to adapting it to campaign play, everything is there. All the building blocks are there. But if your view is, I want to go in, I want to do a bit of a dungeon, the combats are really quite fast. It's easy to resolve tests. It's all about putting your role play first, deciding what are you role playing, how are you acting, what is your character doing, and then you adjudicate afterwards, okay, what attributes used, are there any boons and banes, which is our way of adjusting for difficulty and circumstances. And then you make a test. And it's flexible enough that if you think this is really difficult, can I do something else using a different skill or a different approach to give a bonus eventually to the one test I'm doing? Everything is in there. Very easy guidance for whoever's running the game. So if you want to turn around and go, we just want to do dungeon bashes. We're in a town over here, dungeons over there. And you know what? In between, can we go to one-to-one time? Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's fill your boots. It's adaptable enough for you to do that. Because we took the classic approach to gaming of our genre, which is all about that kind of flexible system, provides you all the tools you want to run any style of game you really want. And then it's providing the GM the advice and the information they need to use those tools to run whatever game they want. And if the tools aren't quite what they want, how to adapt them, how to create more stuff for them, or how to remove stuff from it. And already, I think we've had a few people who've been involved in the rules process, and they were going to be using 5e for some of their stuff going forward. And they're like, no, yours is far better. I think yours gives me all the stuff I need to create a real world that feels unique and vibrant. So yes, to answer your question, I'm hoping, and I think we have a framework that suits multiple styles of play. And whilst our genre focus has been on campaign play, there's nothing stopping it being used to adapt to any other styles of play within the fantasy genre.
Yeah, I'd also like to highlight that the game is completely and utterly, it's not like it leaves bits out and says, oh, no, you decide that. None of that. It is absolutely defined all the way through, which means that the GM does not have to do any of this sort of, well, I need to work out how all of this bolts together, which you do see in some indie systems that go out there. No, the advice is given, the rules are all there, they're all very straightforward, and you know what? They work.
Yeah, that's an important factor is the more you take off of the GM's shoulders, There's just no doubt about that. Now there is you do end up with some crunch, but as you say, if you can hide the crunch in character, like I've always said, if I can put my crunch in character creation, that's where I want it.
Yeah.
Because I want you to be able to sit down. It's like if you want to sit down and take 2 hours to put your character together and really think them through, that's great. But I want you to be able to play that character in 2 seconds. I want you to be able to hand me that character sheet and me just run off with it, even though I didn't create it. Yeah. I want the crunch to be built into the character creation, not, so that it's not slowing down play at the table.
Yeah. And that's actually quite interesting because
that is the balance that you have to strike there. Yeah, that's the balance you have to kind of strike there with the having a crunchy enough or a developed enough and defined enough rule system to to give you all that definition without putting it into play.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'd like to highlight is we actually started off and the system that we wrote was very in-depth, a lot of stuff that goes into character creation. And funny enough, it was on one of your game insights with Max Leo. I don't know if it was the one that Daniel was on with you.
No, it wasn't. It was the first one I did, and I'm trying to remember who I had. I can't recall who I had, but they were lovely guests. It was the first one I did.
Yeah, and he was asked a question about what game would you actually choose to bring people into role playing, weren't you, Dean?
Yes, it was the panel about OSR versus modern gaming. So I was asked by Max if I had someone who hadn't role played yet, and I was suggesting what they could start on to give them the best chance of understanding, learning, and growing within the hobby. It got me thinking, and I said it would be probably something like the Red Box set, a basic edition, something really simple. You can make mistakes in it. It's not too bad, easy to create characters. So if a character dies, the player's not going to be too upset, but it gives you everything you need to start playing the game and developing your skills. And then over time, you develop your skills. And once you feel really comfortable, you can then look further abroad and go, yeah, I want something now with a bit more meat, because this is fantastic. Everybody's had fun, but I want characters that take a bit longer to create because my players want a bit more variety now to their characters. But to get started, it was perfect. And what did that lead us to do?
Well, what that led us to do is whereas at the time we'd looked at Untold Destiny was actually going to be made up of 4 books, and even though we were doing lots of work on it, it was looking like it was going to be sort of next year before we could get stuff out in front of other people. And Dean had this brainwave, and it took some convincing for me because I am very much I like to spend hours building my characters. I will sit there a whole day and I will create the same character in 15 different ways because I just have to get it just how I imagine it. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this. But we came up with together after a discussion walking around the park where we live. And the discussion we had led us to, we need to bring people along with the journey for Untold Destiny. And that created the direction for us releasing our basic edition. So we can do exactly that. We can get people rolling, getting used to our mechanics, whilst we finish the books for the advanced.
No, and I do need to apologize to you guys and to the folks who are going to watch this later, but I've got some, I don't know what is going on with my connection here, but StreamYard is choppy as can be. And I have heard that it's actually StreamYard, not necessarily my internet that's the problem, but I've heard that StreamYard has actually had some issues, but it's probably at least equal parts the fact that, sitting halfway between Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, Alabama. But it is not a bad time to kind of transition a little bit there into the other, like the backside of the topic of knowing your niche. Because, we're talking about mechanics. We're talking about, and we've touched on this a little bit because, all the decisions are it's a durable fantasy game. It's an adaptable fantasy game. And the word fantasy over and over and over again. It is designed to be fantasy. And, all the mechanics are there for, how do we make it something that can appeal to a broad variety of players, a broad variety of play styles. How can we make it easy to pick up? Well, all right, we're going to do a basic set and an advanced set. So now we have a set that, can bring people in and introduce it, and they can go further if they want to, or they can do what a lot of people do with D&D and stay in basic. So we've understood that niche of the gamers that we're kind of targeting. We are not really targeting modern gamers for the most part, but we're also not really targeting hardcore grognards. We're targeting a more broad casual player group, and we're really targeting the people who want enduring campaigns. I guess you could say character
driven. Yeah.
Not say a group that wants to have every game where everybody has 9 characters and they really don't care if they die.
To be honest, it would suit that play style too.
I mean, it can be played for it, but
we're not catering for it, but you could use it and do that.
It can be quite lethal. It's we don't have mass healing in our game, so it can be lethal. But you've got tactics to adjust to that, and every character has a way of doing some self-healing. So it doesn't matter, but it does mean you have to play tactically. You have to think.
You have to support each other. We've got so many ways of interrupting the flow of combat to support what another party member's doing. From aid ally, which is effectively our kind of flanking. You're next to an opponent. The mage has lobbed this huge orb of fire, at the opponent. Has just missed. The opponent's about to dodge out the way, and you go, no, hang on, spend stamina. I'm going to now distract. Nudge the opponent. I roll a d6 and add it to my mage's attack roll, and now all of a sudden the mage is hitting harder and making it less likely for the creature to dodge out the way and avoid the spell. So it's all of that creates that dynamic, interactive flow in combat, but the combat system can turn on a dime. You get unlucky on a few things. You then make the wrong decision on your action because tactically you weren't thinking through something, or you were just reacting in a way where you thought something would happen, a party member would leap in and help you, and they don't, and now you're out in the open. You can be taken down fairly fast. And when you get to
taking a lot of the broad abstractions out of combat, which kind of almost makes it a little more war gamey, because a lot of times the abstractions are taken out of war games. But some of those abstractions anyway. But it's like broad and durable, very useful, but I can play D&D 3.5 at level 15 and have it be extraordinarily deadly too. Doesn't mean it's the greatest in characters for, like, say, basic, where it would be really easy. But not the point I'm getting at there. Like, these are all mechanical niches. We have a way that we can, just like, say, Shadow Dark did, we have a way that we can open ourselves up, or you guys in your game design here have opened yourself up to be big tent. Everybody can fit in here. While at the same time knowing what that core focus is and driving things to move in that direction mechanically. But now let's talk about niche kind of as a genre and decisions, development, not necessarily always mechanical, but some mechanical decisions, but design decisions that are designed to focus on ensuring that you get the fantasy feel. I guess a way to start with that is, to you, what is required to feel like a fantasy game? What elements does it have to have in order for it to read as fantasy and not read as an action game with fantasy trappings?
I'm going to take this.
Go on.
For me, fantasy is about the journey. It's not just about the destination. So it's about working together as a group. It's about having challenges that you tackle, and it's about becoming heroes. That to me is all about the fantasy. I'm thinking back to the books, thinking about, what you're talking about being well read. The books that I read as a kid, and even now, they were all journeys. Lord of the Rings, a journey. It's all about how the players work together. It's about how they operate when they're in combat together. It's about how they actually interact even outside of combat, and it's how they can support each other. But more important, it's not just about suddenly appearing somewhere and doing a big boss and disappearing. That's more sort of computer gamey. When I look at fantasy genre and TTRPG, it's about having that ability to build a story together and be able to use a system in order to take you on that journey for your character. It's about being the heroes. And yeah, that's one of the big reasons we got rid of things like teleport, because it belittled the journey. It took away some of that special time, that time you were walking through a bog and this big weird creature comes out, and Jackson had to throw himself in front of you before you got swamped by this thing. And it creates those legends that live on, those exciting moments for your character. And that to me is fantasy. And it's about the quest. It's about being the heroes. That to me has always been fantasy and always will. Lord of the Rings, the Belgariad. You look at Magician. You look at the journeys and the places they went to and what happened to those characters. Right? They didn't just sit at home and it happened and they just went, oh, well, just pop over here. No, they went on journeys. And that to me is the critical thing for all fantasy. It's a journey for the character, and it's the ability to move around and do stuff. I knew that would make Dean laugh.
Oh yeah. And it's having
see
magic
bone for
and swords rather than guns and shields.
Oh yeah,
sci-fi
no,
shields.
I can't be having guns. Guns,
Well,
guns
you're
in
about the skin
sci-fi.
suit.
Guns in sci-fi, fab. Guns in fantasy, no.
I'm fine with guns in fantasy in certain ways, but
Mm.
when I look at it, and I agree a lot with you there. I'll tell you a fantasy game that is in no way a fantasy game, and I could never get into it, and that is Skyrim.
Yeah.
Elder Scrolls, whatever that is, 5 or 6, Skyrim. But oh, it's a great game. It's like, it ain't a fantasy game. It's not. Like, there's nothing fantasy about it other than the skin suits you put on it, especially when you start fast traveling all over the place. It's like all you've done is take your Fallout game and slap knight swords on top of it.
Yeah.
And it works
Exactly.
for Fallout. Like Fallout, I think as a console game works because it feels like a empty wasteland survival game. And but with Skyrim, you don't have that journey, so to speak. It's just not there. And it's very much a run to boss. And I remember one of the key things about fantasy books that I've read, and something that's almost lost, like I haven't seen this in a very, very long time in a fantasy book, is it used to be very common that the quote unquote big boss was never fought. You didn't fight the big boss. They spent their entire time trying to not be seen by the big boss because the big boss was such a big, powerful, you had to find something that undermined what he was doing to save the world. And you had to do, there was no rolling army up to his tower and fighting. It didn't happen that way. And I think in a lot, especially a lot of like modern D&D, for instance, but a lot of modern fantasy games, we have turned into, I want to fight the big boss. We've turned from fantasy into power fantasy.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's part of why we've lost a lot of the feel and a lot of respect, honestly, for a lot of what's in there. Like, orcs are just humans in a skin suit, just like all the fantasy races. They're all humans in a skin suit now. Why? Because the fantasy's not there anymore. An orc was a terrifying monster. Always should have been a terrifying monster. Because in fantasy, it is a representation of that savagery or of that evil being. It's created by evil, or it's Alexander McCreaswood said that it's kind of derived from the primordial feeling of Neanderthals versus Cro-Magnon man, where it was like yeah, the Neanderthal eventually died out. It went away. And, the hominids, the Homo sapiens are the ones who succeeded. But Neanderthals were bigger and stronger, dumber, more bestial. So that's kind of, he kind of looked at it. He's like, you can look at an orc, is that the way that ancient society would mythologize having to survive against these other bestial, strong humans. And when you think about it that way, it's like you lose that fantasy element when you start saying, we have the tavern that has 19 different races in it. They go, oh, look, there's a drow playing dice over there with the dwarf. It's like, none of this makes any sense. Unless you just treat them all as humans.
Yes.
And I do think it's gone to ridiculous lengths, but you're absolutely right. Fantasy is about a journey. It's about taking part in something, about having to overcome an obstacle you shouldn't. And that, even when you have a super powerful character, like Conan the Barbarian famously was never overpowered by a human in any of the stories. Any of the short stories Howard wrote, it was indisputable that Conan the Barbarian was stronger and faster and more agile than all the other humans. But he always came up against this ancient being that was left inside this tomb that the world forgot, or this flying ape man, or this person who'd been warped by evil magic from Thulsa Doom or Toth Amon. And he had to overcome that as the human, and he may be the strongest and fastest of us, but he still has to face these elements that are beyond the strongest and fastest of us. And it's like, man, he's facing something that is stronger than all of us. How's he going to beat it? And I don't think you can get that with the power fantasy.
Isn't that absolutely critical for all fantasy, is overcoming the odds? It's about going up against it, things that are frightening, that you have to work hard to overcome. And I think that's, now I'm pleased to tell you, Daniel, the orcs in Untold Destiny are very, very, very evil, and they are very nasty, and you will not find them in a tavern unless you are actually being eaten by one.
Yes, if they've taken over your town and they're in the tavern, yeah, you're on the menu. It's as simple as that. And there's none of this grey orcs or anything like that. Orcs that are friendly with civilization. No, orcs are only after one thing. They want to fight. They want to fight. They want a war. They want to conquer. And it's within their DNA. It's within their entire being. They're tribal, and even the tribes will fight amongst each other, with the greater tribe absorbing the lesser tribes. When they come head to head with civilization, they deem civilization as encroaching on their territory, because civilization is trying to expand and retame the world, and the orcs consider that a threat to their way of life, which is this constant warfare that they thirst for. So yeah, our orcs are nasty. They're horrible. They will tear you apart, and they're backed up with their goblins and ogres. And we got a whole lore around them, why they are where they are, tied into the sci-fi version of Untold Destiny, which is a story for another time. But we try to make sure, as any good fantasy does, everything has an origin, everything has a reason for being. It's, we're grounded fantasy in that you're not going to go visiting the heavens or, plane hopping, but the creatures you come up against will be frightening, and have a reason for being in the world. And as you go up the levels and face bigger challenges, those challenges will be truly terrifying, and require a lot more thought. In fact, the first adventure we're doing, the big bad, it's strange you said that, the big bad, if you tried to take on the big bad of that adventure, even towards the end, without finding ways of combating it, it would kill you, because it is immensely powerful, and it's all about trying to go unnoticed, trying to find other ways of defeating or driving off or winning, because a head-on confrontation, when you're unprepared, it's suicide. And that to me is,
yeah, just like that, you're just the fluff.
Oh, it is. But isn't that part of fantasy? You look at it, there's always that great evil that has to be overcome in fantasy. And at the core of our system is being the hero, not being the superhero, because you're very mortal, and the system's designed in a way that, you know, your 10th level, you come up against 20 orcs. You got to still take those orcs seriously. They can still take you down if they mob you and you have poor tactics. So you're never feeling invulnerable, but you're feeling capable, powerful, able to do more. And the threats you're going up against, the threats you're dealing with, given that teleportation doesn't exist, instant communication doesn't exist. If you're in a part of the world and something happens, so the GM randomizes some strange creature that's come into this area and is now threatening the town. Oh, you've got two choices: defend the town and become heroes to that town, or bugger off and try and get back to safety elsewhere, because no one's coming to their rescue. And if the watch can't deal with it and you're powerful enough to deal with it, well, you're the people who have to step up and do something. And to me, this
hero and you have a superhero. The word super literally means beyond and above.
Yeah.
You know, I'm beyond and above a hero. I'm not a hero. A hero is somebody who has to rise up. A superhero is somebody who's already above.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's a hero system. You have to step up. If you don't step up, you're not a hero. It's very simple.
Now, of course, a table might decide they don't want to play that style of game. They like our system, don't want to play that style of game. Nothing's stopping them from doing that at all. But to get the most out of it, it is at its heart a fantasy hero system built around campaign play, storytelling. And that's not to say that the GM designs a story and railroads you. It's got all the tools for the GM to run an immersive simulated world that the players react in and then affect that world. And then the GM's able to feedback what the players are doing, how the world reacts, and create the story in a collaborative way.
Fantastic. What are some other considerations that you had when you were looking at making sure that you have a fantasy, like, you know, to cater to a fantasy player? Like, what are some decisions that maybe weren't mechanically the best decision? Like, you know, you say, oh, well, this could probably work better, but this feels more like fantasy. What is something, maybe that is, what is something you took out that you originally put in that you took out because it just didn't feel like fantasy anymore?
There are certain spells we just completely remove, because you're playing a game of D&D, you get to a certain level, and all of a sudden the superhero stuff kicks in because magic just starts to go off into another world. And to me, that always broke the fantasy. It broke the immersion of the world. It just felt like, you know, oh my God, all of a sudden now we can teleport everywhere. Well, you know, teleportation, if guild houses are using it and merchants are using it, and you got these sending stones where you can communicate from one side of the world to the other, the world's an incredibly small place. A fantasy world should be vast. It should have areas that are unexplored. It should feel like to travel from one place to another is going to take planning and days. Lord of the Rings isn't they found the ring, they teleport, drop into the Mount Tomb, job done. You know, it's, to me, that breaks fantasy. Fantasy is what happens in those great novels, Lord of the Rings being the one that is dearest to my heart. So we removed a lot of the spells that I considered to be world breaking, that I considered to be fantasy breaking. So your mass heals, your resurrections, your raised deads. If you're dead, you're dead. That's it. Your character's gone. It's meaningful now, you know, so you want to keep your character alive. You want to have that attachment. And we did during our business unusual. There was a character death. It was unfortunate. The character made a critical mistake in attacking a powerful demon when she was low on hit points and should have been kept away. She thought she was going to be safe. The creature just pounded on her because she was showing weakness and her spells were being super effective. The moment her character died, she burst into tears on camera and had to go off screen. And she said afterwards she didn't realize how attached she'd become to the character and how much it meant to her, thinking the character's dead. That's it. She can't play it. There's no resurrections, no raised deads, nothing. The character is no more. It's gone. And to me,
decisions have meaning. Yeah. You're making a decision and you look at it. Frodo could have said, not my problem, that ring. I'll leave it outside the door. Feel free to take it.
He tried, but then he realized, well, you take, actually, he took it to Rivendell, and at Rivendell, he could have just kept quiet.
He could have kept quiet,
but he realized there was something that needed to be done.
Oh, yeah. That's what makes him a hero.
Yeah.
I do like that you bring up Lord of the Rings, because I'm like the world's most massive Tolkien there. I can't remember what stream I was on. It might have been on this stream. It might have been on another one. But I was geeking out here a little while back because I've got my first printing, first edition Silmarillion over there, but I found one that still had the map and the dust jacket intact.
Oh,
so I've got first edition. It basically it was almost, but so a big Tolkien guy, but that was a lot of people, most famously Sandy Peterson, how Tom Bombadil is such a bad thing and he derails the story and he shouldn't be in there. And I'm like, yeah, this is how you don't understand what's built into this story. Tom Bombadil shows a couple of very important things. One, Tom Bombadil shows that even though you have this Dark Lord who is a threat to everything in the world, everything within the universe, really, and should be overpowering to everything, Tom doesn't care.
Yeah.
Tom is this being over here that just exists outside of the story because it's not important to him. And you're going to come across that in your fantasy world. It's like, wow, this world is so big that there are people who don't care about the world war.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't care about it, don't see it, don't feel anything, no matter how powerful they are. And it's, as Tolkien said, because he famously never explained Tom Bombadil, and he said, I never have and I never will, because it's a very important element of fantasy that there are things in the world that are not explained. And they're not supposed to be explained. They're just there. And that's what Tom Bombadil is. He is unexplained. He's not supposed to be explained. He's supposed to trigger your brain to think about. It tells you that there are other things you can discover in this world that you don't know about that have nothing to do with what's going on in this story. And it instantly makes the world much bigger. And then when you go back to, like you said about the hobbits, it's like, yeah, there's so many times we could have walked away from this. And they don't, because they're like, if somebody, even meeting Tom Bombadil, they can see, here is somebody who probably could handle this, but he's not going to. So we have to step up and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to Tom even
important.
himself said, yeah, I could take the ring. It won't tempt me. I could keep it hidden here, but I would forget about the ring. I would discard it somewhere. I would leave it lying around and someone would then find it and it would return to its master. Because, as you say, Tom Bombadil had no interest in the world outside of his domain. And the world outside of his domain had no power over him. It's such an interesting character, and I understand why it's left out as like films and stuff like that. But I don't have a lot of people don't like the character. I don't mind it. I think it's an interesting.
Well, he should have been left outside of the films. It's a different medium.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like Cricket Hollow and Fatty Bulger got left out of the films because, in the books, it shows us that hobbits really don't understand just how dire things are. This is how isolated and how insulated they are from what's going on. They're the proverbial kid who's never seen the real world.
Yeah.
There's an innocence about them.
They're a nice little life and don't really understand. And you see that by watching them goof off for decades. But in a movie, that would be incredibly boring.
Oh God, it would. Even as a TV series, you could make it quite interesting. You could actually flesh out some parts of the books, but I think you would lose your audience in places. And typically, once you lost your audience, they're not going to come back when it picks up.
That's right.
So yeah, it's that balancing act. I think the films were great for the medium that they were created for.
Apart from the Hobbit film, that was rubbish.
Apart from the Hobbits, yes.
Yeah, it was trash.
I love the books, but no, not that film.
Well, and there were several problems with that. One was Peter Jackson decided he needed 3 films to finish his money for it, and the second one was he made the movie genre kind of killed him. Greatest movie series, far and away the greatest movies ever made in terms of whatever you want to measure. But they are just like the Lord of the Rings, appropriate for not necessarily in terms of like objectionable content, obviously, but they are appropriate for at least 15, 16-year-old. Like they're really
say what film because you cut out.
Well, the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And the Lord of the Rings as books as well. They are both very much designed. They're appropriate for a 15, 16 plus. They're not designed. They're not children's books and they're not children's movies not because of like, oh, there's objectionable content in them, but because the concepts and the things that they deal with are bigger than what a child really understands. The Hobbit, by contrast, is a children's story. It was written as a children's story. It's supposed to be a children's adventure story. The problem is when you make a movie that's designed for like the 18 to 25 demographic and really speaks to them, and then you want to go adapt the children's story.
Doesn't work, does it?
You're going to make an adult action movie as opposed to a children's movie.
Yeah.
Now, if he'd have made The Hobbit first and made a single Hobbit movie that was really good and really stuck to the book, and then made The Lord of the Rings, I think you could have had a really good Hobbit movie, because you would have grown up watching The Hobbit and you would have aged into The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But he did it backwards, and we ended up with a ridiculous dwarf elf love affair, jump over, apparently the dwarfs needed to surf on the barrels like they were the battle toads.
I know. It felt like they were just trying to create a theme park ride out of it, or something like that. It was terrible.
I think we ranted through it. We watched it.
Your father wanted to watch them. So every Christmas, Vicky's father came up, and we put on, as they were being released yearly, we put on the latest Hobbit. So we were forced to watch it, but he loved it. He thought they were fantastic.
Yeah.
As long as he doesn't come up and make you watch Rings of Power.
Oh God, no.
I'd be like, you're disowned. Out, doors that way. Don't let it hit you.
Yeah, Christmas dinner would have been. There's no way, absolutely no chance of that happening in this house.
No.
I think that's actually kind of background to what we're talking about here, even though it has nothing to do with the game per se. That's one of the major problems that that Amazon has, is they don't know their niche.
Yeah.
They know the niche that they're targeting. They know the people that they're trying to get to watch their show. But what they don't understand is that's not the people who want to watch Lord of the Rings movies. And they've done everything they can to alienate the people who do.
Yeah.
It's like, congratulations, you made a Star Wars movie that appeals to people who really like Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah. And you wonder why the Star Wars people are not showing up. And then you're also wondering why the Wolf of Wall Street people aren't really interested in Star Wars.
Yeah, well, I grew up with Star Wars, and they absolutely destroyed my most favorite role model, which was Princess Leia. I loved that character. I loved Han Solo, and as a youngster, that relationship and the way that the whole sort of film came about was something I adored. I had all of the annuals, I had everything. I loved Star Wars, and guess what? They destroyed that. Absolutely. I can't even watch the originals anymore because they destroyed that story. They had books. They had books they could follow. They had, was it the Legacy or
books, the Empire?
They could have done those, and we would have loved it.
And they would have been great.
That would have been superb. Adapting those books to cinema would have been epic. It would have been Star Wars. You would have had your heroes back on screen. It would have been an amazing story. Everybody would just be cheering for the characters that the new characters added to the story. But talking of Amazon, it's Stargate. There's a whole
Star Wars
fan base out.
Sorry, that was on me, because when I went into, I thought you had stopped, and it was really just me freezing again. But well, no. So when you think about it, Star Wars is a fantasy series. It's space opera. It's basically space fantasy. And it really plays more fantasy than sci-fi when you really look at the way the story tells and everything. And if you look at
journeys, quests, it's
all
fantasy.
right. Once again, we have brought something in Grand Admiral Thrawn, who has power that we have to deal with. And it's not, we already did. Luke comes into age as a Jedi and brings the Force back, and, he can challenge Darth Vader and Darth Vader's evil space magic, and the Emperor's even more powerful evil space magic. He can do that. We can't do that again. But what we can do is we can throw something that he can't just space magic away. We've got an ultimate brilliant tactician who is making every move we make hurt us, who goes and does his research and discovers a lizard that takes away my space magic powers. And that threat speaks on those beats. But, you know, fantasy is also a very traditional genre, and it plays off of certain traditional values and its tropes. And turning Han Solo, the redeemed rogue who steps into his role, and turning him into a deadbeat dad, and it's like, oh, he just, everything he learned he just threw away, and he just ran off to decide to dodge child support.
Yeah, really annoyed me.
Yeah.
And a, you know, commanding political figure, and a, you know, turning her into Space Mary Poppins and destroying all those characters. Like, you have killed this, because you are no longer playing to that fantasy crowd that loves Star Wars fantasy with lasers. But now you're playing to this other audience that doesn't really care. That they care because you've turned whatever it is into a vehicle for their, whatever their real life social problems are. And they're that people historically don't buy your stuff. They love that you're pushing their stuff, but they don't put money into yours. So, and you see it, the proof's in the pudding there. I use this as an example. I can't remember if I used it in the 7 Habits overview, or if I used this in the Know Your Niche. For the life of me, can't remember which one. But I talked about how, like, the combat wheelchairs situation, you get away with that in Cyberpunk.
Yeah. Okay.
You get away with a lot of that kind of stuff. A lot of the, you know, the various, like, transgender issues and stuff like that. You get away with that because Cyberpunk already addresses those things. It's about exaggerated versions of the modern world. It's about what happens when this stuff goes wrong in the future. It's about hedonism and that sort of thing. And then, of course, the core Cyberpunk fan base for the genre tends to be more cynical, for one thing, tends to basically want to see in their worlds people fail for human reasons, despite having more powerful technology and stuff. And they want to see that kind of stuff, like people, quote unquote, being bad. So when they put something like that in their game, it doesn't seem out of place. But in fantasy, we're supposed to be the heroes. We're supposed to be championing what's good and what's, you know, you're supposed to be a moral crusader. Heck, the reason the farm boy is the one going to fight the bad guy is because he's like, you know, I don't have a chance, but this is what's right. So when you start shoehorning that kind of crap into fantasy, it just doesn't jive with the fan base, and it kills the game.
It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's the total opposite of what fantasy is. You know, fantasy is overcoming odds. Fantasy is journey. Fantasy is hope. That's what fantasy is. It's hope for something better. And I think the day that fantasy dies will be the day we lose all hope. So we're going to keep fantasy alive, aren't we, Dean?
Absolutely.
Because it is the hope. It is, you know, that in your heart there are good people who will do more, who will push, who will stand up and say, no, this is not right, and will do things. Fantasy is that very thing that burns in your core and says, I'm a hero. I'm going to stand here and say, no, I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to save my village.
It's what makes us human. Game, and not necessarily just in your game, but what in a game is something that foster that kind of narrative to
you
to
might have to repeat the question.
Those kind of decisions.
You just froze up as you said, what in your game? So
not necessarily just in your game, but in any game.
Yeah.
In any game, what is something that you have to foster that feeling?
So what have we got that is there to foster the feeling? Is that right?
Yes, to push those fantasy elements and to push that style of play, to reward it, if you will, to make it feel right.
So I would say, if I look at Until Destiny, one of the things that makes it fantasy is that it's points of light. It's not just this giant spread of civilization that's everywhere. It's a point of light campaign. We've got our own campaign setting. You can use it with any other setting you want, but we have got our own campaign setting. It's called Kaseya, the world, and you've got your different settlements that you have to journey between, and you've got hope, you've got the new gods, you've got the bastions that are set up in new settlements which are there to keep people safe when the orcs come ravaging, when something goes wrong, it's a place they can retreat to. So the bastions are absolutely key. And I think whenever you look at, in The Magician, you had Criddy, and that was where they retreated to. That was their place of safety. When you look at all of the books together, I mean, that was one of the key areas. You always have to have somewhere which is home. And I think that having Points of Light campaign where you can actually help people establish home, help people defend home, that in itself is fantasy, because that's how you become the hero. You let other people be normal. Yeah, you allow them to live. You allow them to tend their crops and do everything else, because you're taking care of the nasty stuff. That's what, in my mind, makes it fantasy.
Having to build on that, having a fantasy world that you're in the civilized side, so you're part of civilization, which means if you don't act in a certain way, if you're a brigand, you go out into the wilds, you start to thieve and steal, and people are going to come after you, you're going to be hunted down, you're going to be. But if you've got a family, you've got friends, you've got places that you relate to, a town that you were brought up, and your backstory is all around this town and how you got friends in this town. All of a sudden, when the story starts to move in a direction where your town is threatened, that's a motivation for the player. The player is now motivated to actually get involved. It's not a railroad. Events are happening in the world. And now your player's going, oh God, my character comes from there. Guys, we need to go back to my hometown. I've just heard rumors that they're under siege or they're under attack. And that promotes it promotes that kind of heroic play, that fantasy play. So it's going to be things like the setting, being part of civilization. That's not to say you can't have a game where you're the evil people, but if you're playing heroic fantasy, you're part of that civilization. You want to protect that civilization, and wanting to protect inspires you then to want to do what's good. So I'd say systems that are built around that concept have classes that are tend to be geared towards doing good deeds, like the paladin class. And paladins, they should be lawful good or of that ilk. We don't have alignments, but they should be aspiring to be paragons of virtue that people look up to, and would, if they sacrifice their lives to save an entire town, then they have lived a virtuous life, and their life is fulfilled. It's having those themes running through the mechanics, running through the game, running through the setting. Within the advanced version, we haven't brought this across to the basic version because it was a mechanic that I felt was just a bit too much. But we have Legend, and Legend was to promote that kind of play, which is you do something beyond what you would normally be expected to do. You go without being asked to deal with some bandits that are plaguing a trade route. And these bandits, it takes months of play, of campaign play, to track them down, to hunt them down, to eventually find their stronghold, to eventually find out who's leading them. And you bring the head back to the mayor of one of the towns that has been plagued, and your legend, you get a load of legend now because that town loves you. You've done a heroic deed. And then as the more and more legend you get, the more your renown grows, to a point where, towards the end of the game, you're like level 15, 16. Your legend could be such that you now venture into a neighboring nation. And this nation you've never been to. But as you arrive at the border moat house, you got the guards, making sure that you're not an undesirable, and checking your papers. And they immediately recognize you. They've heard of you because your legend precedes you. And it's, as a mechanic, it's to promote that heroic role play, that doing the right thing. And it's a reward structure that fits in with, the setting. and being part of a civilized society. So I think, yeah, when you're asking the kind of themes you can have within a game to promote that, it's those themes, I think. And, you know, I'm going back to, you know, Basic Edition. In Basic Edition, you were up against Barlag the Wizard right from the start. And your cleric friend, if you failed that save, your cleric friend was in, you know, I'm trying to remember whether she gets killed or not. I don't think she does, but I think you're not able to help her. So already the motivations out the gate are about you trying to do the right thing and going up against evil. And I think having those themes running through the game. And typically when you think fantasy genre, you think of those themes. You think of being the hero going up against evil.
I do think that's
doing stuff like that.
Kind of an untapped reservoir there, because there are two games that I can think of offhand that have a version of a reputation system. There's Cyberpunk and there's Call of Cthulhu. Now, Call of Cthulhu has more, it's more built into the credit system. But, you know, in, you know, Cyberpunk, you have a reputation system where you've done big, crazy things and you've kind of got a, you know, a reputation on the street, and you can face people down. They'll back down from you just on your reputation. And I think you're absolutely right on that. That is something that is missing from, I think, a lot of fantasy games, is that there's not really a codified reputation system. I do like it's called a legend system, because that actually, you know, when you talk about local legend or legendary, it's like these are terms that are rife in fantasy. But you see that throughout all the different fantasy books you read, usually with like the mentor type character, you know, the badass that's helping the protagonist out, where it's like they come into the next place. It's like, oh, I recognize you. You know, what's brought you into my land? You know, go back to where you're from. You know, you may be big up there, but you're not great down here, or whatever the case may be. Or, you know, he shows up and all the bad guys are suddenly, you know, dropping their weapons and running away from the one guy, because like, oh my God, he's here. He's the great
Porthos,
legend.
the pirate.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's whoever's here. So it's like that situation, having that built in, I think definitely does help. And it's also like, I mean, alignment is kind of my bugaboo. I'm real big on alignment in a particular way. And it's like, it has to be objective. It has to be objectively defined to have any meaning at all. But that's also part of that fantasy genre. And I think that's also a sign of the recent tend towards hating alignment, mechanically downplaying it and getting rid of it, is because they want to be superhero. You know, the more modern player base, a lot of them want to be superhero. They really don't. They're really not fantasy players. They're superhero players with fantasy skin suit. Whereas the older fantasy players, they can understand that. It's like, well, yeah, this is good. And going and doing good is the hard thing. And there are consequences for it, because that's what fantasy is about. It's about the consequences. And this guides me into that direction. And if I'm not going to be heroic, I'm not going to get the benefits of being heroic. Whether you call it the alignment system as it exists as the 9 alignment system, whether you do it in a more faction system like the original 3 alignment system, or whether you use something like Palladium's style, which I forget what they call it, but it's really similar to alignment, that has to do with their personalities. It's more zoomed in. At the end of the day, I think that is it's important in fantasy to, in my opinion, evil at the bare minimum, good and evil. And you can divide other things too, but really important, I think you have to have that clear. Fantasy doesn't do good with ambiguous bad guy who you sympathize with. Fantasy does good with, this is an overwhelming evil that, you know, even if I don't like this person over here, I need to get together with them because this is big.
Yeah. There's always something that is threatening a way of life or a place that is dear to the protagonist's heart. And when you look at it, that's one of the core things from fantasy. And it's also about the journey. It's the journey of the character.
Yep. Both physically and, you know, in the more abstract way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that is something that a lot of the modern games have taken away from us, is the feeling of growth. Which
Yeah.
I think that was one thing you guys had talked about before about the the learning. Something that was considered is that that kind of fantasy genre idea of that progressive growth, or was that really just a, hey, we want this to play well all the way through?
It was a mixture. We wanted it to play well all the way through because we wanted to feel as if the characters had something to aim for. But at the same time, it also was about the growth of the characters. They have to learn. So the characters on every step of their journey improve, they get better. But it's the same as you're developing skills in real life. You don't suddenly, if somebody shoots you, it's going to hurt. That doesn't change when you're 50 versus when you're 20. It's going to hurt. But what you might do is recognize, because you're a bit wiser, the sign that somebody's about to draw a gun. And therefore you'll be able to get out the way, or you'll be able to make sure that it doesn't happen. And it's about those skills that help you survive longer. And it's about, Dean always describes it as the horizontal growth rather than the vertical growth.
Yes, yeah.
There we go.
Our
I do
system
listen
has,
to you occasionally.
yes, you do. Our system has slight vertical growth, so you get slightly more powerful as you go up the levels, but it's not a huge. You get a few more hit points. You get access to some new abilities, but it's on the horizontal. You gain better tools. You become better able at dealing with the stuff around you. It's like you can train to be the best swordsman in the world, and you're now the best you can be with the sword. But you get beaten. And why do you get beaten? Because someone's got more experience and someone had more tricks than you had. They could take more punishment than you could. They could deal more damage to you than you, because they understood how to use their blade in a better way than you did. So a lot of our growth, you're not having these stacking numbers or stacking, your skills going up and up and up and up and up as you go up the levels. Within the basic edition, that's set across each of your attributes. So it's tied to your attribute proficiency. Within the advanced system, you actually have a skill system. So if you're proficient with the skill, take a d20, roll it, add the appropriate attribute. I'm now an expert with the skills. So I've got a few skill points going up a level. I decide to become an expert in a skill. I've now got 2 dice, 2d20. I roll them, I take the highest dice. Now I'm consistently beginning to get better at using that skill. I'm still limited by my attribute. However, our target numbers, our DCs are 20, unless it's opposed, in which case you're up against who you're opposed. So you just need to always roll 20 or higher. And then Boons and Banes will shift that up and down by either adding d6s or taking d6s away. But I'm now going up. I've got more training. I want to become focused in this skill. So I now add another d20. I'm rolling 3. And eventually, do you know what? I'm level 10 now, and I've got to choose a skill to master. I can only choose one of my skills to master. So I think it's going to be this one. And now I get 4 dice. I get 4 d20, and I get to pick the highest. Consistently now, when I do stuff with that skill, I'm not relying on the luck of 1 d20 that may, as I found out when I was playing this incredible character I had created, which was my barbarian thief.
Yeah.
And he had a really good,
D&D
ability
to
in D&D to open locks. And on the session where we were trying to break into to this complex, I couldn't roll above a 3. And I tried 5 different locks. I couldn't roll above a 3. The consistency wasn't there to reflect the training your character had gone through.
Yeah.
So having the multi d20, we're not having these numbers that keep going up to make it look like you're getting better, but in reality the target you're up against also keeps going up, which was very classic for third ed and Pathfinder. What you've got is the static to achieve anything is a 20. If it's easy, you get a boon. Add a d6 to your test. But to achieve something is always a 20, and it's the number of dice. So consistently, I'm going to be good at doing something. Less reliant on luck as I become more skilled, more reliance on my skill. And it's quite funny, I got these graphs in the background that show the kind of percentage chances of success given your attribute, how many dice you're rolling. And all of that maths is fantastically done. It's a great bit of maths, but it's all hidden. The player never sees it. They just pick up 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 dice, and they're rolling, and they're hoping to see a high number. And the more dice they're rolling, the more they're hoping. And if they got a Bane and they're rolling a D6, maybe even 2d6 and taking it away, they're hoping those numbers come up low. But if they got boons, they're hoping those numbers come up big. And some of the stuff we've had around the table, some of the real laughter, the moments of excitement, getting so close to victory, and another player then going, hang on, I've got something that can help you, and then being able to do something, it's tremendous, because the numbers are the same. So the player's not always thinking these numbers are going to get higher and higher and higher.
You don't have to keep looking at your character sheets. You can actually, you can sit there, you can focus on the game. And because each person can help each other, because you've got all of these reactions you can do, basically it means it keeps you focused at the table. And the best thing and the best feeling ever is if you're rolling those attribute dice for an attack test, is when multiples of your lovely d20s come up 20, because every single dice in that pool of d20s that comes up a 20 adds to your crit. So if you are lucky and you get, say, 3 20s, roll 20.
Which it did happen in a game. I think it happened to you, wasn't it? It was on roll 20 as well, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Jack took a screenshot of it because it was just brilliant. Everybody erupted around the table. It was fantastic. But so that's the horizontal growth. Yeah, is you getting better tools and becoming more consistently good at what you do. So you can now attempt the more difficult things and consistently achieve greatness, rather than when you were at low levels where it was, I'm fairly good at this, but it was still relying on a bit of luck. I think that answered your question. I don't know.
We got all excited as always.
We did.
Like when I look at this from that know your niche perspective, when I look at this from a game design perspective and how does this factor in? Because honestly, and this is one of the great things about talking to designers that, designers that have success in creating a functional system, is you can't have these discussions without seeing all 7 of those keys pop in. Because like you said before, they are all kind of tied together.
They are. They sort of do this all the way through, and the one feeds the other. So
they like, you're absolutely correct. They feed off of one another, and you can see them, and you can see where they poke out. And even when you look at here, when you look at this, you're looking at these mechanics and how they feed into the feeling of a fantasy game. You have things that trigger specific fantasy tropes, and even in the tactical nature of some of the combat design, it's the aid other action, so to speak, in a lot of games has always been kind of crap. It's like, okay, at the beginning I have to decide I'm going to aid my friend and they're going to get a +2.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not much anything, but it's like, hey, my friend is going to do something. He's going to attack this orc, and the orc is raising his shield, and I'm right next to him. I can hook that shield. Like, I can jump over there and like dive on that shield and pull it out of the way so he gets hit.
Yeah. If you've got an axe weapon with hook, you can even turn around and instead of doing aid other, you go, no, I'm hooking. I'm hooking the shield. I'm pulling it down. And now I'm rolling a D8 instead of a D6 and helping my friend even more, because it's just react. Do you know what? This has had players hooked around the table. Actions are quite quick, and players are looking for those opportunities to leap in, and the reactions are even quicker. They're snappy, and it just keeps the flow going.
And you're engaged in combat. You're not just sitting there doom scrolling your phone waiting on your next turn because you've got stuff to do. And the thing that pops into my head is there's going to be that instance where I can stab the Nazgul in the back of the knee so that Eowyn can stab him in the face.
Yeah.
Well, funnily enough, you mentioned that we have something called Taunting Strike, which is one of the and I love it because basically if you're in combat and you've got one of your allies next to you, and the creature goes and hits your ally, you go, oh, no, you don't, and you smack them, and you can actually do damage to them. And what it does is it draws their ire because, of course, you're hitting them. if you go and hit someone in the face, they're going to potentially look more towards you. And what this does, it makes you the bigger target. So if you are playing that sort of, I'm going to say the tank character, you can actually draw the ire of the creature purposefully and protect the person next to you. You can use shields to cover somebody. And we had it in one of our play tests where we had wyverns coming in. Funnily enough, the cover for our basic edition, it was drawn by Luke Eidenschink, and it was based off this actual play test where we were in a town and we were defending a town from these wyverns. And there were some guys on top of the parapets, and they had the ballistas keeping trying to keep the wyverns at bay. And we went up there and we used our shield to protect the townspeople from the acid breath from these wyverns, so that they could actually use the ballistas to ground the wyvern onto the ground. So it would go through the wings and it would ground it, so then everybody could pummel it. And at the time, I don't think my character hit the wyvern once, but the character protected the townspeople, protected the people with the ballistas. Here I say it all wrong. And it was phenomenal. And it was so much fun. Because it wasn't just
you kept them alive. It was breathing acid across the tower, trying to take out the guardsmen, and you used your shield ally to basically put your shield in front of the guardsmen and give them the bonus of being able to resist the breath weapon, which kept them alive.
So
and then
fun.
The next shot they did took down the wing of that wyvern. So our flying creatures, you can always target the wings. You take a bane to the attack, but the damage is dealt to the wing. When you bring the wings, they're just one set of hit points down to 0. The creature is grounded. It has to land at that point. So it's risky because you're not hurting the creature, but you're hurting its wings. And typically, if you've got wyverns, they're vicious creatures. You want to drive them off. It's easier to drive them off. You don't want to wing them and have them on the ground, because then they become even more dangerous. And then you've now got this wyvern in the middle of a town, or your lumber camp. It was a lumber camp that they were at, trying to destroy everything in sight.
But we did it.
You were telling them to wing the wyvern so you could actually finish them off.
Yeah. And we did. We managed to, as a group, we managed to take this wyvern out, and it was, and that at the time, because it was the advanced bit, we gained so much legend from that. Because of what we were doing. But that essence feeds throughout the whole of Untold Destiny. You are the heroes, and you've got the tools to be the hero. Now, my last campaign where I was in D&D, I actually played an Abjurer. And, it was awful. It wasn't what I wanted, was it? It got to high levels.
You had this vision and it fell so short.
So short.
You had great spells, but you could only concentrate on one. So your ability to protect was so limited. It's like you're an Abjurer. You should be projecting shields and helping absorb damage. Yeah.
Yes, I turned into Uber. I used to teleport people in. I used to teleport people around the battlefield and then basically hide until such time came to teleport them away again. And
I think you had the fling spell, didn't you? Which you could like touch people around you and fling them across the battlefield.
Yeah, and I used to do it. Your job. Off you go. I'm going to sit here, and it was awful. We were at high levels, and I loved the character, but I hated combat. And I love combat. This isn't a girly going, we don't like combat. I love combat. So I was really disappointed. So when we designed the Abjurer, unfortunately, it's in the advanced system. The Abjurer is what I want in an Abjurer. They can protect people, they can project shields to save people. It is that protection. In
a system where you don't have healing magics, and combats will always zero down towards one side winning and the other side losing. So you haven't got these wasted, it's a vicious affair, and that can change quickly. We've also got a complex. It's a beautiful morale system that gives you a lot of depth when you're controlling the creatures, and will dictate when the creatures decide, we're done, we're leaving. And that can be used tactically as well. But the Abjurer, stopping damage can be a huge swing for your side. protecting your front line or protecting a weaker member at the back and preventing them from falling and taking wounds, that's a huge swing. So it's all these kind of mechanics and these ways to promote that heroic gameplay, that interaction between party members, that feeling as a group, feeling as a fellowship, if I could use that word.
Do you use your morale system against the players as well, or only against the NPCs?
No. The morale is for the creatures. So when you start a combat encounter, the creatures will have a set of morale based on whether you caught them unaware, ambushed them, or whether they're protecting their home. And then the morale I get to use as the GM to allow the creatures to do special stuff. So if a creature hasn't got something like a cleave attack on it, it doesn't mean it can't cleave. I could just spend a point of morale. The creature's now moving in, it's got this huge weapon, it's going to cleave because thematically it feels right. And I've now got a mechanic that allows me to do it in a way that's fairly balanced. However, a creature dies. The player who kills the creature rolls a d6. That's taken off the morale straight away. So they take a hit to their morale. And now at the start of every round, the morale ticks down by 1 more because a creature's dead. And then a second creature dies. So I'm now losing 2 morale. The moment morale hits 0, morale's broken and the creatures will decide to retreat, or if they can't retreat, they will surrender. There's a couple of others. So if they're animated creatures like zombies, skeletons, the magic around them just collapses. The necromantic magic can no longer hold them up and they just fall apart. Summoned creatures or ancestrals, demons, stuff like that will choose to return to the aether because they don't want to die in the physical world. So the morale system's quite robust, and it gives that you can win a battle without having to kill all your opponents. And it's tactically then you're thinking, if we take out some of the smaller creatures, they're not hurting us so much, but we're hitting morale a lot quicker. But then that big guy at the back's really hurting us, and he's a leader. So he's commanding his creatures outside of his turn to do stuff. And so we're really getting pounded, but then we're not taking care of the creatures so it's all of this kind of tactical depth.
It gives you the tactics, yeah. And when you talk about, can you use, do the players have, the player characters have morale? Yeah. The way I would describe it is, if you get anywhere close to 0 hit points, you start getting scared. You don't die at 0. You're not even unconscious at 0, but you can be wounded. And the minute you start taking wounds, you've got 5 wounds and you're dead. No coming back, no revivifies, no sort of, whoops, let's do that again. You hand your character sheet over to your GM, and
you get one last moment to do something heroic, like a few words, something like that. And think, again, using Lord of the Rings, Boromir. He's been peppered with arrows. Each arrow, he's on 0 hit points. Each arrow is a wound to him, but he's still standing there, he's still fighting, he's still holding. The final arrow goes in, he's now 5 wounds, he drops to the floor. The halflings think he's dead as they get dragged off. Aragorn arrives, and the player who's playing Boromir, even though he's strictly speaking dead, he gets that one last moment to have a touching speech, a talk with Aragorn's player, that touching moment, because this is heroic role play, and those moments can really set the scene. And it's the farewell for the player and his character before he decides to, possibly after swearing off not playing games again, create a new character. That is always you. Whenever you lose a beloved character, you're like, right, I'm not role playing ever again.
And that right there is actually pretty apropos, because we are coming right up on 2 hours now. That is definitely a know your niche type moment, because if you look at those mechanics, they play very heavily into fantasy. Morale being a thing, because a lot of where do legendary heroic moments come from? They come from, how many times is it that the hero didn't kill everybody, but that last thing broke their morale and all the orcs ran away. And it's like, we were going to die, but we stood strong. So we had something happen. And then, like you said, you get those last heroic moments, which, a lot of times we lose in role-playing games because of the way we handle hit points and stuff like that. The way we handle death is, it's like, well, this would have been a cool time for my paladin to have, it really was kind of a heroic last stand, but, he kind of got killed at halfway through or something. So he was not really close to death when he died. And now all of a sudden he is, and that was anticlimactic. But now you've got a vehicle that says, hey, you can take one last thing. You can do one last thing. Maybe you dive over there and try to tackle the guy. Maybe you try to tackle the guy off of the edge of the cliff or whatever, and you're both dead, but that's your last thing. And now we've created fantasy Of course, all of that plays into what you did with habit 3 that's coming up on the next video, which is to think first in settings, then in systems. Your setting is fantasy. Your genre is fantasy. Your setting is this heroic adventure, and your system now backs that up and makes players have those moments to amplify the setting, because we didn't make it a slave to the system that we built and the math rocks and the wonderful stuff. So on that note, let me get some heroic final words from Vicky and Dane, and then we're going to call it a day. And I hope everybody else is here on Monday for Intelligence is a Dump Stat and checks out Everae Games, checks out Untold Destiny on BackerKit and TTRPG, especially you get the free version. You know, jump in, play, send in your feedback, see how much you love it. And guys, last word is yours.
So our launch for Untold, I nearly said basic Untold. What am I on? Untold, you can tell it's so hot here. We're not used to it. Untold Destiny Basic Edition is taking place at midnight UK time. And that is on the 30th of June, Tuesday, 30th of June.
1st of July, if it's midnight.
Yeah, but it's for us. It's right. It's the
it'll be the
otherwise I'm
30th
late
for the USA. Yes.
Otherwise I'm late delivering. So no,
Anyway,
it's
carry on.
So we are going to be having a special Destiny's Dispatch where we are going to be celebrating. That's on our YouTube channel, which I believe is in the links. Yep. So live streaming live the launch where we're going to open up where you can get hold of Untold Destiny Basic System. Honest guys, I want you to play, I want you to roll, and I want your feedback. All right. If you love this game as much as we love this game, you are going to find your home in fantasy.
I think Vicky has said everything on behalf of both of us. Thank you so much, Daniel, for inviting us. We really
appreciate you guys coming on board and sharing your experiences and your wisdom with the rest of us, because just like everybody else, like everybody who has a YouTube channel and half the people in the comments, we all got our games we're trying to develop, and some of them been developing them for 20 years and got one page written. But that's what we're here to do, is to make all these games better, to give more to the community, and to make sure that we all have more games to play. Yeah. So I appreciate you guys coming on and chatting with me. Hopefully the technical difficulties didn't chop things up too much. But guys, Everae Games, links are down below. Corvid Codex, links are down below. And I will see you guys next time.